Rivers Rising by Millie Howard. Illustrated by Dell Thompson and Noel Snyder. High water. Josh Fowler lay on the braided rag rug in front of the big pot-bellied stove. He marked his place in the book he was reading and looked up. Ma was rocking Buddy, gently humming Rock of Ages. Pa was sitting at the table, reading the Bible, a mended fishnet at his feet. Behind the curtains, April rain slashed at the windows. It drummed on the tin roof of the houseboat. Josh rolled over, listening. Ma stopped humming to listen too. "There's nothing like rain on a tin roof," she said softly. "It's like music. First soft, then loud, then soft again." Josh nodded, eyes half closed. The low fire in the stove had sent a cozy warmth throughout the houseboat. The rain slowed, settling into a slow drizzle, gently pinging the roof. Josh yawned and closed his eyes. When he awoke, lamplight spread a golden circle across the room. Josh lay for a moment, watching shadows moving across the ceiling. Behind him he heard quiet clinks as Ma set the table for supper. "Stew?" he thought hungrily, taking a deep breath. He could hear Pa outside on the deck, moving toward the door. Pa's footsteps stopped, and Josh knew he was hanging his slicker on the peg beside the door. Josh was on his feet when the door opened. He watched as Pa ran his hand over his wet hair. Ma handed him a towel and gave him a questioning look. Pa nodded in answer to her unspoken question. "Rivers rising," he said. "Bad?" Ma asked anxiously. "Can't tell yet," Pa replied as he sat down at the table. "But there was a heap of snow this winter, and too much rain this spring. Wouldn't be surprised if the Reedy River really leaps the banks this time." "Won't be any school in the morning then," Josh said, grinning. He sat down. "You've never seen a real flood, son," Pa said. "The Reedy's a right friendly stretch of water most times, but flood water's deadly. We rivermen move carefully when the water's rising." Mr. Fowler waited until Ma sat down across from him and then bowed his head. "Let's pray." Josh listened as his father prayed for God's mercy on the land. High water had always been a part of Josh's life. Almost every spring, the river and the streams that fed it would overflow their banks. When the water covered the bridges, the buses would stop running, and school would be let out until the water went back down. The grown-ups kept a careful eye on the water level while the children splashed happily through their holiday. No, high water had never held terror for Josh. But when bedtime came, even Josh could tell this time was going to be different. He could feel the Reedy moving under the houseboat. "It's rising fast," Pa said the last time he came in. "A foot since sundown. She'll be over the banks by dawn." Josh hardly slept that night. He lay in his bunk, listening to the creaking as the river rocked the houseboat against the planks of Fowler's Landing. When he awoke early the next morning, Josh eased out of bed quietly. Trying not to awaken Buddy and Ma, He pulled on his clothes and tiptoed to the door. Pa was already outside, walking along the dock. He had rope coiled around his shoulder and was measuring the distance from the boat to the oak tree nearest the riverbank. Josh didn't have to use the ladder to reach the dock this morning. Water lapped at the top rung, and the houseboat rode high against the landing. Josh leaped across and ran barefoot along the planks to his father. "What are you doing, Pa?" he asked. "River's still rising, son," his father answered. "It's already over the low banks downstream, and it'll soon be over the landing. Help me tie the boat to this old oak. It'll hold the boat fast." As Josh helped Pa wind the ropes around the trunk of the tree, he asked, "Are the trees on Crab Island as old as our oak?" "Probably older," his father grunted, giving the rope one last hard pull. "That ought to do it. Run and bring me the rope from the landing." Josh ran back down the dock and untied the rope that held the houseboat. Holding one end of the coiled rope, he walked back along the dock to the big tree. The houseboat swung away from the dock and drifted closer to the tree. Pa and Josh pulled steadily, bringing the houseboat gently to the bank. With swift movements, Pa tied that rope too. "Now she'll stay," he said in satisfaction, "and the landing will protect her from floating branches. I've never seen the river rise much higher than our landing anyhow." "How's it going?" Ma asked. "You up already?" Pa called back, teasing. "I thought you were going to sleep till noon." Josh grinned. His folks were always teasing each other. Life on the houseboat flowed as smoothly as the reedy river usually did. Ma cooked and took care of Buddy, singing as she did her work. Pa was a fisherman, just as Grandpa had been. When school was out, Josh went with him crabbing and fishing off Crab Island. Then they brought the day's catch home to sell in a little fish and bait house above Fowler's Landing. Ma gave them a good-natured smile and went back inside. Josh and Pa cleared the landing and dock of anything that would float away. Then they went to eat breakfast. Shifting current. Josh and Pa spent the rest of the morning securing everything on the houseboat. Anything that might tip over or fall was lashed down. Loose things were taken inside to be stored. Pa went over every inch of the houseboat. He was checking the roof to see if it needed any repair work when the sheriff called from the bank. "Hello, Fowlers." He nodded in approval when he saw the boat secured to the tree. Glancing at the water that now covered the landing, he said, "Looks like you're all set for a while." "Reckon so," Pa replied, reaching out a hand to help the sheriff aboard. "How are things going?" The sheriff nodded at Ma and ruffled Josh's hair. He grinned when Josh ducked. "If your family's going to be all right for a while, I could use your help," he said to Pa. "The lower part of the town's already flooded, and the farms north of us are half buried under floodwater. We need every man we can get that knows the river. We've got to bring those people to high ground." Pa nodded. "Been expecting that. My boat's secure, and my people will be all right." After the sheriff had left, Pa kissed Ma and Buddy and motioned for Josh to follow him to the back of the houseboat. "The water's rising faster than I've ever seen it," he said quietly. "There's going to be a lot of people stranded, and I won't be back any time soon. You have to take care of Ma and Buddy." Josh swallowed. "We'll be all right, Pa." "Just remember to check those mooring lines," Pa said as he untied the rowboat. "The current is sweeping close to shore." "Okay, Pa," Josh said. He went back to stand beside Ma and Buddy. They waved until Pa rowed out of sight. The rest of the day dragged by. Ma went about her work quietly, and Josh could tell she was praying for Pa and the people caught in the flood. Even Buddy prayed quietly, running his wooden train around the braided rug. Josh checked the water every hour, and every hour he shook his head at Ma's look. "Still rising," he said at last. "It's over the high banks now." Night came, and Pa was still gone. At supper time, Ma wordlessly handed the Bible to Josh. He read a chapter slowly, stumbling over some of the words. Then he tried to pray as his father did, speaking to the Lord as a friend. Supper time was quiet. The fish and cornbread were soon removed from the table, almost untouched. Josh checked the mooring lines again while Ma did the dishes. He held the lantern high, peering toward the bank. The water was more than a foot over the bank now, churning around the roots of the old oak. Pieces of the broken branches tumbled over the landing and swept under the mooring lines. The water was too far over the landing for it to offer any protection to the houseboat. "Oh, Pa," Josh thought, "come home." He went back inside and set the lamp down on the table. Ma touched his arm gently. "The Lord will take care of us," she said quietly. When Buddy was asleep, Ma sat down beside Josh. "Like me to read to you?" she asked, picking up David Copperfield. Josh nodded, knowing that neither of them would sleep until Pa came home. Ma read page after page, but still there was no homecoming shout from the river. Unexpectedly, the houseboat trembled under them, rocking on the water. Ma stopped reading. Josh reached for the lamp and stepped outside. Holding the lamp up, he looked at the mooring lines. They were only inches above the rising water that stretched out into the night. The current had shifted, pulling them away from the tree. "A branch must have tangled for a moment," Josh called back to Ma. He had turned to go back inside when the grinding crash came from the direction of the submerged landing. He spun around, heart thudding. A large shape had lunged out of the night and smashed into the landing. Josh held his breath, listening to the creaking and grinding. Then there was a splintering noise. "The landing's breaking up!" he cried. "Come inside, now!" Ma grabbed his arm and pulled him back inside, slamming the door behind them. The houseboat shuddered as the broken mass hit the back of the boat. Then, with a jerk, the boat began to move. Josh stared at Ma. "The lines broke. We're loose." "The current'll take us to midstream," she said, her face pale. "We'll just drift downriver." Josh's eyes met hers for a moment before he looked away. 5 miles downriver, cliffs crowded the edge on both sides. Tonight, the cliffs would form a bottleneck for the rushing river and floating debris. There was no way off the river. He couldn't take the boat across the fields. It would be wrecked on submerged fences and sheds. What could they do? Josh's mind searched his memory of the river for an answer. Crab Island. "Crab Island," he said thoughtfully. At his mother's questioning look, Josh said, We can use the current itself to swing us into the south end of the island." "But that's a sandbar." "Not anymore," Josh said. "It'll be covered with water just like everything else around here. Only that sandbar is good and high. The water will be shallow." "And the island will block the current," Ma whispered. "Partly," Josh said. "Anyway, I think the boat'll slow down long enough for us to get some lines around the live oaks." "You'll have to help, though, Ma. We'll need to get 2 lines tight at once." Ma nodded. "I'll get ready." Josh went outside as Ma tucked blankets around Buddy. She stuffed extra ones down the side of the crib for padding. Leaning down, she kissed him softly, and then went to the door. Outside, Josh was at the tiller, dodging floating logs and planks whenever he could. Ahead, the black mass of Crab Island loomed out of the dark. Quickly, Ma tied new ropes to the ends of the houseboat, leaving them in neat coils. She tucked her skirt around her legs and tied it tightly. The boat slid swiftly along the island. Josh edged in closer, letting underbrush and branches drag at the sides and the roof. The boat slowed slightly as it neared the south end of the island. "Ready, Ma?" Josh saw Ma glance back at the door. If the boat got away from them, Buddy would go through the bottleneck alone. Ma's lips moved, and Josh knew she was praying. Josh shoved the tiller hard. He heard a sharp crack as the houseboat swung to the right with a jar that almost took Josh to his knees. It slid across the sandbar into shallow water. "Now, Ma!" Josh and Ma grabbed the coils of rope and jumped. Water splashed into Josh's face as he plunged toward shore. Behind him, he could feel the houseboat turning slowly as the current from the other side of the island reached for it. Josh ran desperately, fighting the water. He reached the first tree and flung his rope around it. 2, 3 times he wound the rope before tying it. Then he scrambled across the wet underbrush to Ma. Struggling, they tied the last knot. The houseboat steadied, rocked gently, and was still. Josh and Ma fell into each other's arms, laughing and crying at once. When they scrambled back onto the boat, Buddy was screaming. Ma took the crying baby out of the crib and held him. When his crying had settled into hiccups, she knelt beside the crib and began to thank the Lord for saving their lives. Josh knelt beside her, weak and shaky, with relief. After he had checked the lines once more, Josh lay down on the rug and slept. He did not awake again until he felt the morning sun dancing on his face through the window. "You were so tired, I let you sleep," Ma said. Buddy padded over and tumbled on Josh. "Up," he gurgled, "up." "Come look," Ma said. Josh stood up and followed her to the door. Water covered the land around them as far as they could see. To the south of them, the river flowed swiftly, but more calmly than before. Sunlight glinted off the water, and off bits and pieces carried by the current. "It's quit rising," Ma said softly. "Pa'll find us as soon as he can. He'll be proud of you, son." Josh turned his head. "I'd better repair the boat, then. I thought it was going to rip apart when I ran it under the trees." Josh spent the rest of the morning repairing the boat. First he hammered back the boards that had been torn by the branches. Then he patched jagged edges and loose shutters. Josh knew that the sharp crack he had heard had been the rudder. He could do nothing about that except be thankful that it had only cracked, not broken. It was late afternoon when Josh saw a boat approaching. Quickly, he called to Ma. "Pa's coming!" Ma, Josh, and Buddy were calling across the water as soon as Pa came within hearing distance. Pa was grinning as he tied up next to the boat. "Hold on," he said. He looked over the mooring lines without speaking. Then he said, "Somebody told me this morning there was a houseboat down here. I figured out what had happened when I saw the landing." He listened to Ma's account of the night and then put his arm around Josh. "Son, thank God you kept a clear head." Josh hesitated. "I broke the rudder." Pa began to laugh. "What's a rudder compared to my family? You can help me start on a new one tomorrow." "Come in and eat," Ma said. "You look like you can hardly stand up." "I'm tired, all right," Pa said. "But we got everybody moved. When the river settles a little more, I'll go back and help the folks salvage some of their things." He removed his cap and put it on Josh's head. "And Josh can go with me. It'll be good to have a real riverman along."